Bring my think tank tonight outside the courthouse. In Dubuque, Iowa, criminal defense attorney Daniel Deloy is with us. Also in studio, criminal defense attorneys Daryl Cohen, Holly Waltman, and Ben Githia. Did I get it right, Ben?
Githia.
Githia. Got it now. All right. I told you I'd mess it up first time. Githia. Right. I'll get it the next time. All right, Daryl, let me start with you. The fact that the prosecution is establishing alibis for other people, and it begins here. How powerful is it? How important is it? And did they just pull the rug out from underneath the defense?
Well, the prosecution is planting. We're talking about a pig farm. The prosecution is planting all the seeds that they need to plant to take away the defense that he may have. So we've got a pig farm, we've got tanning. Next thing you know, we're going to have flying pigs, which isn't going to happen. But the prosecution is doing a good job by piece taking away a potential defense.
Yeah, I think this is huge. I think this is really important because the defense didn't really point the finger directly, but kind of hinted at it. And this was the only person they hinted about as having a potential, could be a potential suspect in all this. And he's saying, no, wasn't me.
I disagree. I disagree with all of that. The first thing being what you said earlier. If someone's going to come and bring an alibi to this community and to this part of Iowa, something to do with pig farming or something to do with farming is going to be a logical explanation. It's going to be the type of explanation that this jury pool and that this community can relate to. I also think that it was a mistake in opening to say the word murder out of the defense mouth. It's something they could have addressed in closing, and I also think the state is doing a poor job by disproving or giving alibis to other people. They need to try their case, and they need to focus on one person only.
Yeah, but the whole defense case here, Ben, is that it's a murder, somebody else did it. And to me, if prosecutors leave this guy alone and don't mention it and don't figure out where he was, the jury's going to be wondering.
I totally agree. If I was on the defense, that would be the person I would point the finger at. It is him. So I think that the state has done a good job addressing him having an alibi. You bring up a good point about his wife, Mrs. Frazier. Where was she at the time? If I were the state, yes, I would try to loop that in. I wouldn't concentrate too much time on it, but I would like to address it because as a defense attorney, I would bring it up.
Yeah, and we don't know if she's going to testify or not. Daniel, let me ask you, you're in Iowa, you know these jurors a lot better than I do. Will they want to hear exactly where Mrs. Frazier was also at the time of the murder?
Yeah, that's a good question. Iowans, as many people may not know, or at least in a farming community, people tend to be more reserved. They reserve their emotions for until they're behind closed doors. But now that the venue has changed, that may alter a little bit as far as the wife testifying or not. That's probably something that I would want to know more about. Is number one, he's lied to his wife, he's lied to his defendant. The idea of the GPS, although compelling, doesn't eliminate the issue of potentially having his son lie for him and his son taking his phone for whatever reason. So I think there's some unasked questions that were not maybe addressed, whether in depositions or could have been addressed at trial, to at least plant the seed, at least on the part of the defendant's side, as to getting rid of the overwhelming idea of where he was and where he wasn't. As to his wife, yeah, that may be a compelling thing, but I'm not as concerned about that as I am about the quote-unquote airtight alibi of...
Daniel's not buying the alibi.
Of the lover.
Daniel's not buying the alibi, Daryl.
Well, look, the defense, Vinny, has got to plant everything they can. I mentioned earlier the state's planting it. The defense, they don't need to be not guilty. They need to be not guilty, sort of. You've got to be able to prove me guilty beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. So the defense is looking for reasonable doubt. A little bit here, a little bit there. Well, here a pig, there a pig, everywhere a pig.
Yeah, and as we look at this case, I mean, there's not an infinite number of potential suspects here, right? I mean, it's very simple. Okay, these people are having an affair. That gets very emotional. You're destroying lives. People have children. They've invested their emotional well-being in someone else. He's cheating. They're both cheating on spouses. So to me, it's pretty simple, right? It's the person she's cheating with in case she wanted more than he wanted, and all of a sudden he's worried that he's got a fatal attraction on his hands, right? So you've got to eliminate him if I'm the prosecutor. His wife probably not happy that this woman is sleeping with my husband. I would simply put her on for 2 minutes to establish where she was. But to me, you've got to tie those loose ends up. Otherwise, you leave yourself wide open to at least one juror speculating about what could have happened. I'm not saying any of this happened, but you got to put in a clean case, don't you?
You do, but also one thing that hasn't been said at all, what if this is a murder for hire? There are 2 men that we know of at least that are emotionally tied. What if he didn't do this at all?
You just made it more complicated for us, huh? Can you believe this?
I'm a defense attorney, Vinny.
Right.
That's what I'm going to do.
Well, but the murder for hire, yeah, exactly. But is the other man going to, wow.
Are they going to get bacon for payment?
It's
Cured or uncured?
It's unreal how far this all can go. So, Ben, I know that prosecutors don't want to go too far trying to disprove something because you have to prove it.
Correct.
But to me, it's not that far. To 2 people, that's not too far.
It's not too far at all. I mean, they put an alibi in for Mr. Frazier. They knew that they had to do that because the defense was going to jump on that. He is their prime suspect from what I'm hearing, well, from what we've heard so far.
From the defense.
From the defense. And so the state, I guess, anticipated that, and they put forth an alibi. His wife, maybe that's a little bit far attenuated regarding
I
her
don't
culpability.
think she's near a suspect.
Right.
But I don't trust what people interpret beyond a reasonable doubt to be.
Correct.
A reasonable doubt can be, well, we don't know where the wife was, and there could be one juror who could think, well, that's reasonable. Maybe she did it. They didn't tell me she didn't do it.
Vinny, this is a small town. She has been embarrassed. She has been cheated on. Do you think that she said, oh, yeah, I would love to go on national television on this murder trial and
Give
be a
her a
witness for you?
subpoena.
We may not like what she has to say.
She may not like what she has to say, but she'll have to testify if she's placed under subpoena, and she'll either have truth or she won't have truth, and her facial expressions, her body language will tell the good jurors everything. But you're right, there can be a juror or 2 who wants to know, I need it perfect. Actually, I need it more than perfect.
When we come back, we've got a lot more to talk about. Again, we're talking about Iowa here, but it was a town and a case full of rumors, number one, and then another question. Why not just get a divorce? Well, prosecutors tried to answer both of those questions today. We'll take a look at it.
Did Amy relay any information to you about her relationship with Todd?
Just that she could never leave him because she didn't want to leave the kids.
And did she tell you if she was happy or unhappy?
She said she was not happy, but she wasn't going to leave him because she didn't want to leave the kids.
Did Amy say anything to you around that time about a divorce from Todd?
I mentioned if she wanted to get a divorce.
And did Amy respond to you?
I asked Amy if Todd wanted to get a divorce, and she said no, because only reason is he would lose half of everything, and it is socially unacceptable.
And did Amy indicate to you whether or not she was planning on working it out with Todd or if she was done?
She said she was done.
So I felt like maybe if I prepared Todd just a little bit, and said, hey, Todd, maybe you two really aren't meant for each other. Maybe you two would be better off not being together.
And do you recall what Todd's response was?
He said, I have worked for this farm since I was 11, and I will not give it up.
Wow, powerful testimony today from prosecution witnesses trying to demonstrate a motive. Why not just get a divorce? Your wife is cheating on you and cheating on you again. Why wouldn't Todd just want a divorce? Well, these witnesses are saying solely acceptable. Let me bring back in my think tank. Are those good motives?
Well, I think that her motive to not get a divorce for the kids is definitely a good motive for her to stay. But the fact that it's socially unacceptable, maybe in Iowa, it's frowned upon more so than it would be here in a bigger city. I'm not sure, because it sounds like, just based on the evidence that I've heard, she was ready to leave. So I don't know if those were the reasons precluding her from filing for divorce.
Daniel, let me ask you this about socially acceptable divorce in Iowa. Does that ring true to you, that he's going to be somehow an outcast if he divorces his cheating wife?
In a farming community, especially with the dwindling amount of farmers that we have here in Iowa, things are a little bit closer to the vest as far as how farmers hold things. So I would say, yes, in a large part, you tend to see a smaller divorce rate among farmers. Now, whether the causes are less because they're secluded, I don't think that really applies anymore today. But it's certainly the expectation that a farming wife and husband are, I guess, more able to get over life's conflicts and issues. So I would say, yes, it's very much still a reality in rural Iowa or rural anywhere that it is still considered socially unacceptable, even if the same two people lived in a city would have been divorced 5 years ago.
Absolutely. The 2013, the first one. But how about the money here? He's worked since he was 11 to build up this business. Millions of dollars at stake here, doesn't want to give it up.
I think the more compelling argument is the timeline of the second affair. For me, if I was the state and I was trying this case, that's where I would start. Of course, the money, but that's something that can be rebuilt. I mean, that's something that can be...
No, half of it's gone.
Is it necessarily gone? I don't know the law in Iowa, but if my spouse is cheating once, twice, not 3 times a lady, but once, twice, 2 different affairs, would a jury, if it's a jury, would a judge, just the bench, allow her to have half? I wouldn't think so.
3 kids as well. I mean,
child support.
Well, it's going to be expensive either way. And does it even matter what the law is or what his perception is? If he believes he's going to lose half his stuff, isn't that a strong argument for murder, motive for murder?
It could be. It also depends, like, is this the reason that he wanted to stay after the first one? Is that he wanted to keep his property? Depends on what the state, it depends on what the defense is. Do they believe that they can prove that he wanted to stay with her for other reasons than his financial? And that's their burden.
I've covered a lot of spousal murder cases in my day, unfortunately. It's unfortunately way too common. And oftentimes it's about what happens socially. What are people going to think about me? And I don't want to lose my money. Now, the other big part of some of the testimony from friends and coworkers today involved the rumors that were out there and what impact they may have had on the actions of the parties involved. Take a listen.
So would it be fair to say that Amy's very concerned and upset that there's rumors about her having another affair?
Yes.
And did it appear, well, let me ask you this. Would it be fair to say that she is understanding from what you told her that you were at this medical conference is that these rumors were coming from the Manchester hospital?
I did not understand that they were told to me by an employee from the Manchester hospital, yes, that I was at the conference with.
Okay. Because I think we'll learn later today that we now know that Amy called an employee at the Manchester hospital that same day.
She did.
Very upset, asking that these rumors be squelched.
Yes.
What was Amy saying?
She asked me if I hear any rumors about her, and I said no, I did not. And being I worked at the hospital, she was crying that she said she was having an affair, and it wasn't true. And if I heard any rumors at the hospital, please stop them. I did ask if I was saying something, and she said no, but being you work there, I think you hear things, and please stop them for. I could barely understand her, and she was crying because Tristan did not want to get on the bus that morning because he didn't know if she was going to be there when he got off the bus, and said that Todd found out about an affair and she wanted the rumors to stop.
Now, during this conversation, what was Amy doing?
I have no idea where she was at.
I'm sorry, what were you observing of her behavior?
She was upset and hysterical, and I just couldn't hear. All I could hear was she said something about Tristan not wanting to get on the bus and something about an affair, and she wanted it to stop. And
did you know what rumors what Amy was talking about?
No.
Did she say anything to you at that time about having an affair?
Just that the rumors needed to stop.
And did she refer to what the rumors were?
An affair.
The rumors were flying, but the rumors were actually true. So I guess if you're spreading a rumor and it's true, it's not so much a rumor, but people are spreading the truth about what she's doing with this other man. And she's very concerned about Todd finding out. Is she concerned because she's fear for her own safety here?
My guess is she was fearful of everything. Fearful of Todd finding out. Fearful that she would lose everything in a divorce. Fearful for her life.
Yeah, the picture that's being painted is she's doing it. She knows that people are talking about it, and she's afraid Todd's going to find out here.
One of the things I liked about this testimony is that it was back to back, and it was almost verbatim. It was almost like you could hear her voice through each one of these witnesses and how she was describing her fear. Now, what it was about ultimately was that he was going to leave or take half or the kids. We don't know, but this was very consistent, and so I found it very compelling today.
And it also seemed there was some sort of a blowout at some point where Tristan, their son, was concerned, didn't even want to get on the school bus. Was fearful what might happen to his mom, what his dad might do.
Right, and well, what I want to know is, and the question that comes up to me, was she fearful of her husband finding out, or was she fearful of Jerry and his wife finding out, those rumors circulating, and then it causing trouble for him? Because she mentioned earlier she didn't want him to lose his job. To me, I would spin that as her primary concern was for Jerry, not necessarily Todd finding out. Or I would couple them together.
All right, coming up, big question in this case, and may be the absolute bottom line for prosecutors. Did Todd Mullis have enough time to murder his wife? We heard the testimony yesterday from their son, who testified about what was going on. We'll take a look at the map of the farm, figure out where everyone was, and how long it would take to get from point A to point B to commit this murder, and try to answer that question for you tonight when we come back.
Welcome to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. And we're doing what we do best and diving straight into our trial.
You have to look at everything in this case.
He murdered our daughter. Did you take the hose and squeeze it?
Guilty on all counts.
This is true crime all the time.
And you're not gonna miss a moment of it. That was really eye-opening.
This is what I love to do.
Amy Mullis' death looked like a freak accident, a possible occupational hazard from working on a farm. But there's more to this story than meets the eye. Defendant Todd Mullis. He's a 43-year-old hog farmer accused of murdering his wife with a corn rake and leaving their 13-year-old son to find her body.
He used a corn rake because he tried to make it look like a farm accident.
The problem is she had 6 holes in her back, and the corn rake only has 4 curled prongs. 4 of the injuries came from one angle, 2 of the injuries came from another angle.
6 minus 4 equals murder.
If Todd Mullis is convicted of murder, he could spend the rest of his life in prison.
Will his internet search history reveal the truth?
So you have these searches, and then you have 4 days later, Amy dead.
It's going to be an absolutely fascinating case.
When investigators start looking at homicides, they, look around. Did someone have a motive to do this? And then if that person had a motive, did they have an opportunity to do it? So motive in this case, according to prosecutors, pretty straightforward. His wife is cheating on him and cheating on him again. He doesn't want to get a divorce because he doesn't want to lose half of his stuff, and he doesn't want the public shame that comes with a divorce. And the fact that at this point, he's just tired. She's done it again. He can no longer trust her and won't do a divorce, doesn't want to lose his money. So, did he have an opportunity to do it? Well, yesterday we heard the testimony from his son, and that day, the three of them were on the farm. The two little ones were inside the house, but the three of them were working. Mom, dad, and their 13-year-old son, Tristan. So Tristan testified about what was going on, and at some point, Mom leaves one part where they are, the hog barn, and goes to the red shed, and dad and son are together. So the question for this jury is, based upon the facts of this case and the testimony, was there enough time where dad was out of the sight of his son Tristan in order to commit this murder? So let's take a look now at the Mullis family farm and try to lay out the lay of the land for you here. You see the North Hog Barn is on the top. That's where they were working. The red shed is where the murder took place. South Hog Barn, for the purposes of this discussion, is irrelevant. One other relevant place is the office. Let's put a circle around where the office is in the North Hog Barn, because that's where the son had to go to get a drink. And that was the time that he left the sight of his father, where he and his father were not together, when he went to the office to get a drink. So you kind of got the lay of the land here, okay? Now let's take you inside. First, let's go inside the hog barn. That's what the hog barn kind of looks like. It's big, it's long, and when it's filled with hogs, there's a ton of them in there, okay? Next picture, as we continue, we're going to go to the outside now. And that window that is circled, the small circle, that window, that pane window, that is inside the office facing the red shed. Now look to the right side there. You see the door that's open? That's the exit from the office. So going from the North Hog Barn, that exit would be the closest exit to get to the red shed. And then to the right there circled, you see the silos that you'll see a little bit later. Let's continue to take a look at some of these photos to figure out what we're looking at here. This is from inside. To the left, the circle, that's the hog barn that I just showed you. Now, the two arrows are pointing into the office. And if you look directly inside that office, that is kind of where the hose is, where their son went to get a drink of water. So he leaves the hog barn on the left side, comes into the office, and enters the office. Let's take a look at what the office looks like. Okay. You look at the arrow that's going to the east. That window looks into the hog barn. The circle is the exit, that door I showed you from the outside that you would exit if you wanted to go to the red shed or somewhere else. It's the closest exit to the red shed. And the window pane that I showed you before, that's the arrow that is facing the west. Now I've got a reverse angle picture of the same office from the other angle, okay? So the east and west is transfixed here. So to the left now is outside, and to the right is the hog barn. But the door that you see there, that's the door. You go through there and make a right-hand turn. You'll be back in the hog barn. But the circle in the middle there, that's the hose, okay? Again, he comes into the office to get a drink out of the hose. That was his testimony, once or twice. Let's take a closer look at that, in case you didn't believe me. There's the hose inside the office that I just showed you. So the question now is, how could dad get to the red shed while his son is inside the office getting a drink from this hose? Let's take a look at the map again. There's another exit from the North Hog Barn in the back. So you could go out the back, walk about 480 feet, and that'll take you to the red shed. Don't see any windows there on the side, but remember that other window in the office, you could potentially, if you're looking out there, maybe see part of the red shed, although there's some trees and brush there. Now, you could also get to the red shed from the office much closer. Take a look. It's only about, I think it's 180. Oh, first we'll take a look at the walk itself. So this is the walk from the back of the shed, of the North Hog, of the hog barn. This is from the back exit You have to walk that entire distance past the silos and kind of towards the left there. That's where the red shed is, okay? So that's the walk that would have had to been done if, in fact, Dad exited out the back to murder his wife. And as I was saying, if you go from the office, though, it's only 190 feet. Okay, so it's a lot quicker. But there was no testimony from the son that Dad actually walked out that door that you're looking at to go to the red shed. He said that never happened. All right? Does that make sense? I'm trying to make some sense of all of this. Let's bring back in the think tank. Did he have enough time? Because the time frame is not clear from the son's testimony. At one point he said Dad was gone for 1:40, but then he told his attorney after the deposition that that was inaccurate, but we don't know if it's more than 1:40 or less than 1:40. But just based upon the testimony, he went to go to drink. Did he have enough time?
Let's get inside this poor Tristan's 13-year-old head. His mom's been killed. His father may have been the person who killed it. Is his truth the real truth, or is it a truth he's believing? Is the time frame accurate? Is it not? Could his dad have disappeared for more than that period of time? I am saying, in my view, you cannot give this young 13-year-old child who's just lost his mother and may very well lose his dad the credibility of an unaffected adult witness.
But you've got to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt.
And unless they have something else to try and...
Is there enough time? If he's just going to get a drink out of that hose, is there enough time for him to go to that red shed, commit a murder, and get back into the hog barn before his son comes back from getting a drink of water?
If you believe his first amount of time that he gave?
No. He said that wasn't accurate.
But then he also, the state didn't go in and clarify with him, then is it more or less than 5
We don't know
minutes,
how long he
more
took
or
to get
less
a drink.
than 10 minutes. I don't think that they've proved that there's enough time to commit this murder.
I have to agree. Now, if he's coming in and he's saying, okay, I'm guessing it was 1:40, and now he's recanting and saying, well, I'm not sure how much it was.
He has no idea.
Does the jury infer it was 10 minutes, or do they infer that it was 5 minutes? I think it'd be more likely closer to 5. I don't think that he would over-exaggerate that amount of time. And based on that testimony, which is all the jury has, it's not enough time.
Daniel, was there enough time for him to murder his wife?
Well, I think certainly the argument could be made that, even though the son went to get a drink twice, maybe the son was assuming the times that he was out of his dad's side as opposed to the other way around. And from what I understand from the accounts that have been given, they were both working on different projects, albeit in the same long barn. And it's quite conceivable that the parts that the defendant needed were in the same shed that the wife was located in, and made frequent trips, albeit one not for the intended purpose that he was expected to go. So it might have been quite normal for his dad to step out for a minute here, a minute there to grab more parts. So that certainly could create the opening for the defendant to do what is alleged has been done.
Darrell, you're a former prosecutor too. You've made these arguments many times. What you say discount the son's testimony because of the nature of what he's gone through, his age, everything else. What does the prosecution argue to the jury? That there was enough time during the drinking of the water, or there's just enough time and based on what?
One, I wouldn't completely discount Tristan's testimony, but I think you have to take into account all that he's gone through emotionally. Is there enough time? I don't know how long it takes for Dad to run, walk, trot over, stab his mom with this rake or not. And I think that in Tristan's mind, it may have only been 1:40. I think the state, all they need to prove is that we have a bad man who is furious about the wife and what she has done, not once but twice. And by the way, that's a double-edged sword. They could think he's pre-punished by the 2 affairs that she had, and they may
feel sorry for him.
May feel sorry for him if he looks and has the right body and facial language.
How long does it take to go get a drink of water? Like, isn't the jury going to be thinking about that? Like, okay, the testimony is he went to get a drink of water. We've got all these pictures and evidence, and how long does it take to take a hose, turn it on, and get a drink?
Not very long, but also think about who he is. This is a Saturday morning. He is working on his parents' farm. Of course, he did not just jump to go a straight line to get a drink of water, diligently get it, and run back to go work on a Saturday morning at the farm.
And you think the jury will think that, okay, he's going to take his
a
time?
little bit more time. But one thing that I think is interesting that we haven't talked about yet is there's almost 4 months before Todd gets arrested for the murder of his wife. That's a lot of time to plant some seeds into his son's mind about this. Another thing that I just noticed on these pictures, there's the side of the barn is open. And so there's actually more opportunity for Todd to be seen if he did in fact take that path to go towards where the body was found.
Seen by who?
By Tristan.
By Tristan.
By Tristan, who's in the office.
If he's there, if he's paying attention.
But he's not paying attention. You're not having him go get a drink from a water fountain. He's got a hose. So you turn the water on, you let the hot or the warm water go through, and then you drink it. So there's more to this than what we're talking about, than what the jury has seen so far.
So, Daniel, let me ask you, what does an Iowa jury do when it's time to deliberate this issue? Are they going to focus on how long it takes to get a drink? Will they be locked into that time frame? Or will they perhaps look at it with a grain of salt and say, well, okay, he's not staring at his father the whole time?
Well, from what I understand, I mean, this took place in November when it was quite cold and the sun was hanging up heaters. And so my thought goes to the possibility that perhaps the long barn was quite cold at this time, and so the son could quite conceivably have gone in to get a drink, not so much because he was thirsty, but just a chance to warm up. I don't know that. I don't know if the questions on that have been asked, but again, it is an awful lot to ask of a 13-year-old to give a precise time. The time that he gave of 1 minute and 40 seconds, I don't know any teenager that could give me the down to the second as to how long his dad may or may not have been visible.
That's a great point.
I think the jury will take that into consideration, that it is a 13-year-old.
Absolutely, and it's tough because prosecutors have the burden beyond any and all reasonable doubt, and they've already said somebody else is responsible for all of this. Todd Mullis didn't do it, couldn't have done it, and you will be convinced at the end of the case. So this is one of their big issues. Folks on social media reacting tonight. We'll react to your reactions when we come back. The reaction to this case on social media, a lot of reaction to just the fact that the defense has said someone else has done it, and people taking a look at, well, who could have potentially done it? Are there any reasonable arguments the defense could make that would lead to reasonable doubt about someone else who had motive and opportunity to commit this murder on the Mullis family farm? So let's get right to them, and we begin with Tracy, who actually has a question. Why are both prosecution and defense all sitting down? I've never seen that before. Aren't they supposed to stand up? Daniel Deloy, you're in Iowa. You practice law there. Why are the attorneys like casually sitting down at counsel table during this trial? We covered cases all around the country, and they're usually either at a podium or they're wandering around the well of the courtroom.
Yeah, and that may be true. And fresh out of law school, 12 years ago, that was my expectation. But here in Dubuque, I mean, not everybody knows everybody, but almost all the attorneys know everybody else. The judges are typically attorneys or were attorneys here in the area as well. But it's not just the nature of the beast here in Dubuque, but it's just standard practice that unless they're making a formal argument, they are allowed to rest and sit during questioning. Now, during opening statements and closing statements, it's pretty typical for them then to stand, whether or not there's a jury. It's one way that they, again, indicate respect to the court. So it's certainly not a sign of disrespect to the court. It's just a standard practice here in Dubuque.
All right. Any of you ever sat during a whole trial?
Never. But I did notice in the Winslow trial in San Diego, one of the lawyers was sitting while questioning. And in another civil trial, of which I'm very familiar in San Diego, another one of the prosecution or plaintiff's lawyers were sitting. I think it shows disrespect to a jury, and I think jurors, for the most part, have never been on a jury. So what do they know? What they see on TV, lawyers stand up, yes, Your Honor, no, Your Honor, look at the jury, look at everybody, and try to impress them by not impressing them.
Yeah, and in Dubuque, everyone's sitting down. So Latrucia is asking a question or has a statement here. Vinny, if I were a juror, the only reasonable suspect in this case so far is Todd. It appears that not only is the farm important to him, but equally important is how he is seen in the community. A husband who is willing to forgive his straying wife, then in reality, her second infidelity was more than he could take. Things may look good on the outside, but be totally different on the inside. So this is what the prosecution needs, someone who looks at this guy as the only reasonable suspect in the case.
They do, and I think one thing to point out for some of the people at home on social media, there's guilty and there's not guilty. The word innocent doesn't show up on a verdict form, and so this individual may very well have done it, and if the state can't prove it beyond any and all reasonable doubt, then the jury is instructed by the judge and the law to find this person not guilty.
Is the fact that he is there on the farm at the time of the murder, how much weight does that get, just being there? Because it's just him, his 13-year-old son, and then the two younger children.
I mean, it's great for the state. Who are the usual suspects? Who has the opportunity to have committed that crime? Either him or his son. Who has the motive? They would argue that he does. She was cheating on him. He forgave her once. She's done it again. He doesn't want to lose his property. This person online would have been a great juror for the state. And the defense has an uphill battle in this one.
But if that was his plan, wouldn't the day before this have been better? Because all three of the sons would have been in school. And then he could have casually found her, or someone else helping on the farm could have casually found her if he, in fact, did murder.
Isn't it better, though, that someone else found her?
I think if he did it, and if we're going with the state's contention, then yes. In which, I mean, if he did do it, having your 13-year-old son find the bodies, it's a bit problematic. But I think in his mind, if he did it, it wouldn't be a far stretch for him to say, I didn't find the body, my son found the body. He's far removed from it. In his mind, I guess that would have been able to fly.
Someone could have come from the woods as well. No one's mentioned that.
A person completely unknown.
Absolutely.
Complete stranger. Pam, I don't discount Jerry. This is the man who's having the affair with Amy. Was his alibi checked out? He was very cold in the last emails, and she was a threat to his family and probably work if it were to come out. He was not that into her. And gravel roads, hog barns, that is how you show a woman you love her. He is a dog and had a whole lot to lose. Let's get back to it, because we started this whole program talking about his alibi. GPS. Is that the corroboration that this jury needs, or do they need something more than GPS?
GPS is helpful, but GPS can be manipulated. How? Because I can get you to take my phone. How? You can walk away and leave the phone. So many ways that GPS can be manipulated, but it's one piece of cooperating evidence that's very important.
Daniel, let me ask you, how far do you think prosecutors need to go here in terms of Jerry? Because we've got Pam, who does not discount Jerry. If she's on this jury, there's reasonable doubt.
I think they would need to go a little bit further and explore whether or not there's been any reported claims or history, not just from family members and associates, but even third parties who don't really know the two individuals involved as to the heated relationship that they did have, whether in public or again whether there were any previous criminal complaints, which I'm not aware, but I do think that would certainly help the state's case to demonstrate that he was prone to violent outbursts, or in this potential case, as alleged, willing to put action behind his words.
Linda, whoever did it evidently was very angry according to the wounds. Remember, the pathologist said, either 2 or 3 strikes with the corn rake. I'm beginning to wonder about the son. He was very inconsistent with the times that he gave. He seems to be very attached to his father. It may be he was angry about her cheating. This is problematic for the jury because he's actually there, right? But is anyone honestly going to believe that this 13-year-old boy is going to take the life of his mother because she's cheating on dad?
I think it's a bit of a stretch. If you're the defense, of course, you want that theory out there floating along with the others to add to your reasonable doubt. Just based on his testimony and how he was saying that he kind of blacked out for a while when his dad brought the truck around and his dad told him to snap out of it, I think that's kind of consistent with how a 13-year-old would behave. Now, would he become angry enough at his mom to the point where he would stick a dull fork in her 2 or 3 times? I don't know.
And if, in fact, this happened, which no evidence of this at all, but wouldn't the father know? Because he was there.
Vinny, I think the important thing here is that we have legal degrees, we have licenses, and we've seen these types of trials play out. The 12 people that are deciding this case have not. They are very familiar with farm equipment, and Iowans, from what I understand in this community, a lot of them work there, but they don't work in law. They don't have a legal mind. So yes, it is very reasonable that there are people on the jury that are like Pam and other viewers that are really buying into all of these alternative things that have not been checked out by the state.
Let me ask you, Daniel, about what Linda's saying here. Could an Iowa jury or one juror there even fathom that it's reasonable to think that this 13-year-old boy would do this?
Well, certainly. I mean, that may enter their mind, but again, we are dealing with a 13-year-old. I don't know if there's been any demonstration, and that may be something for the defense to raise. That maybe there were some behavioral issues, not just the concern about, well, we should homeschool the child because we want him to take over the farm. It might be some disciplinary issues at school that led to that conversation about having him homeschooled. So those are certainly issues or even questions that maybe a jury here, a juror here in Iowa would maybe want to have an answer to, but I don't know if that would rise to the level of eliminating the beyond reasonable doubt threshold that's required.
Here's one from Michael, and this one was probably the most shocking of all that I came across today. I think it was actually an honest accident. The defense told us in their opening statement that it's not an accident.
That's why
The prosecution officer said it was not. But here's Michael.
Yeah. I'm with Michael. I think it's still possible it could have been an accident. And like I said at the beginning of tonight, I think it was a fatal mistake for the defense to box themselves into a murder.
Have they boxed him in, though? Because Michael is thinking this, and he knows what the defense has said.
It's not always what comes before a jury. It's what doesn't come before a jury. And you can't get in anybody, much less 12 people's minds, to know what they're thinking and what they're not thinking. How could this be an accident? According to the medical examiner, it was not once but twice.
Or 3 times.
That's not an accident. Or 3 times. That's not an accident. But on the other hand, it could have been anybody, and all the defense has to do is plant reasonable doubt. And we have to remember that most jurors don't understand reasonable doubt. They, regardless of what the judge says, they understand doubt versus no doubt. And there could have been somebody or something. That's what we have to deal with, and that's what they're dealing with.
Becky, Jerry's wife, I say, Vinny. Again, this is my concern because of the testimony of Jerry saying that his wife was not there. It was just him and his son there. So I think prosecutors have to somehow, some way establish that they investigated it or spoke to her or put her on the stand to just let the jury know where she was. It wouldn't take more than 3 minutes on the stand, right? That's the only questions I have for her. Where were you? Okay, great. Thank you. No further questions. Here's Melody. It's either the father or the son, no in between. Okay, let's deal with that for a second. What if? Is that reasonable doubt? If the jury thinks it's one or the other?
Definitely.
Is that the definition of reasonable doubt?
Absolutely.
No. because they think it's one or the other. They're going to absolve the son because he's 13 and has gone through all of this. So I don't see that as reasonable doubt.
Daniel, do you see that as reasonable doubt if a juror says it's either the father or the son, no in between, it's got to be one or the other?
I think it would be, regardless of the capacity of the child to understand what he was potentially doing. I do think if you present that alternative, or if the jurors themselves argue, well, it's either child, which is 13, or dad, who is, late 30s, they may side with that, but as far as being on that, but if they are genuinely stuck with not knowing which one is which, whether dad is protecting son or whether whatever the scenario might be, I do think that at least presents would be present to most of the jurors a reasonable doubt as to who exactly it was that did the deed.
Shane takes it one step further tonight, and this is, I think, wow. The 13-year-old son and or his friends. Remember, there was testimony that his friends were there and went back to the house with him afterwards. The son, because it would have been his inheritance and or assisted and orchestrated by dad. The inheritance part, I don't think it flows that way. I mean, if mom has half and dad has half, I mean,
he still gets a quarter and a quarter, right?
Right, he still gets a piece from either one, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, to me, that's sort of irrelevant. But now introducing his friends who happen to coincidentally show up at the end, and then Shane's reading one step further into that.
Well, he's reading one step further, but as I understand it, there was no evidence of a struggle. So if his friends were involved, there would have been evidence of a struggle.
Great point.
And they say, who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of man.
Absolutely. So anyway, bottom line here, folks, no one has pointed the finger at the 13-year-old son in the courtroom, but the big issue here is, could jurors independently, even if no one argues it, could they think that, and could that equal reasonable doubt? When we come back, a lot happened today, but who had the better day, the prosecution or defense? Our think tank will answer that question next.